The wind howled through the halls of Skyreach Castle, with the voice of winter itself carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of storm. High above the clouds, suspended by ancient giant magic and the will of its draconic masters, the flying fortress had become a nexus of dark power where the fate of the world would be decided. Rezmir stood at the heart of the castle's ritual chamber, her black dragon mask gleaming in the light of magical flames that burned without fuel or air. The half-black dragon's scaled hide rippled with barely contained energy as she oversaw the final preparations for a working of magic that would make the cult's previous achievements seem like parlor tricks. Around her, arranged in a precise pattern that had taken months to perfect, lay the accumulated wealth of kingdoms. Gold coins formed rivers of precious metal that flowed in carefully calculated channels carved into the chamber's floor. Gems of every conceivable variety caught and reflected the magical light, creating a dazzling display that would have made ancient worms weep with envy. Artifacts of power hummed with contained magic, their energies slowly being absorbed into the greater working. But it was not merely wealth that filled the chamber. Arranged in alcoves around the walls were treasures of a different sort. Prisoners taken from a dozen communities across the Sword Coast, their life force intended to fuel the ritual's most demanding requirements. Men, women, and children from Greenest, Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, and countless smaller settlements, all destined to become the sacrificial offerings to the Dragon Queen's return. "The convergence approaches," announced Azbara Jos, the red wizard whose mastery of planar magic had made this entire endeavor possible. His scalp gleamed with perspiration despite the castle's frigid air, a testament to the magical energies he was channeling. "The barriers between the planes grow thin, and Tiamat stirs in her prison." The ritual circle that dominated the chamber's center was a masterwork of magical engineering, its patterns incorporating draconic runes, Thayan magical theory, and formulae dating back to the earliest days of the world. 5 points of power marked the positions where the dragon masks would be placed, while streams of molten gold carried magical energy between precisely calculated nodes of force. "What of the 5th mask?" Rezmir demanded, her voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Without the red mask, the ritual cannot reach its full potential." "We proceed with 4, Jos replied, though his tone suggested he was less confident than his words implied. "The mathematics are more complex, the magical requirements more severe, but it can be done. The Queen will return, though perhaps not with the full measure of her power immediately restored." It was a calculated risk, and both leaders knew it. The 5th dragon mask remained beyond their reach, lost somewhere in the chaos that had claimed Tiamat's previous servants. Without it, the ritual would be incomplete, the summoning imperfect. But delay was no longer an option. The convergence of planar energies that made the summoning possible occurred only once every 5 centuries, and that moment was rapidly approaching. "Begin the preliminary incantations," Rezmir ordered. "I want the magical foundations in place before—" Her words were cut short by the sound of battle echoing through the castle's corridors. Shouts of alarm, the clash of weapons, and the distinctive roar of spell combat suggested that their supposedly impregnable fortress was under attack. "Impossible," Jos muttered, his hands already weaving defensive spells. "We are thousands of feet above the earth, protected by magical barriers and patrolled by dragons. Nothing could reach us here." But even as he spoke, the sounds of combat grew closer. Through the chamber's great windows they could see flashes of light that spoke of magical battle, while the castle itself shuddered under impacts that suggested siege engines or very powerful spells. The chamber's doors burst open to admit a squad of cult guards in full retreat, their purple robes torn and bloodied. Behind them came their pursuers, a mixed group of heroes whose very presence in this place defied explanation. At their head strode a figure that Rezmir recognized with a mixture of rage and grudging respect. Langdadroza Cyanwrath moved with the fluid grace of a born warrior. But the half-dragon's weapons were turned against his former allies, and his eyes burned with something that had not been there during his service to the cult. Purpose beyond mere vengeance. Beside him fought creatures and people who should never have been able to work together. A cloud giant whose mastery of wind and storm had clearly been instrumental in reaching the flying castle. Bullywug warriors whose amphibious nature seemed utterly out of place in the frigid mountain air, but whose crude weapons dripped with poisons that dropped cult guards with single strikes. Harper agents whose knowledge of the cult's operations had clearly been crucial in timing this assault. But it was the figure at the center of the group that made Rezmir's blood run cold with recognition and fury. Talis the White had come to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers, and her pale eyes fixed on the white dragon mask with an intensity that promised violence. "Talis," Rezmir said, her voice carrying a note of genuine sadness beneath its anger. "You have chosen poorly." "I have chosen wisely," the half-elf replied, her own weapons already glowing with the cold light of winter magic. "The cult promised me power, promised me purpose, promised me a place in the new order. But promises made by those who serve a goddess of lies are worthless by definition." The battle that erupted in the ritual chamber was unlike anything any of the participants had ever experienced. This was not merely combat. It was a clash between fundamentally different visions of what the world should become, fought in a place where the very fabric of reality had been stretched thin by magical workings. Rezmir's black dragon mask granted her abilities that went beyond mere magical protection. She breathed clouds of acid that dissolved weapons and armor, while her claws could tear through steel as easily as parchment. But Cyanwrath met her charge with techniques learned through decades of honorable combat, his own draconic heritage allowing him to match her strength while his training in formal dueling gave him the edge in skill. Azbara Jos unleashed the full fury of Thayan battle magic, filling the chamber with fireballs and lightning bolts that turned the accumulated treasure into hazards as deadly as any weapon. But the cloud giant, Blagothkus, called upon storm and wind, creating pressures and currents that turned the Red Wizard's own spells against him. The Bullywug warriors proved that their reputation for cowardice was largely undeserved, fighting with the fury of creatures defending their ancestral home against those who would destroy it. Their poisoned weapons found gaps in cult armor, while their amphibious nature allowed them to take cover in the streams of molten gold that would have killed other creatures instantly. But it was Talis who fought with the greatest intensity, her pale weapons wreathed in killing frost as she carved her way through cult defenders toward the ritual circle, and the masks that represented the culmination of everything she had worked toward. This was personal for her, in a way that went beyond ideology or loyalty. This was about identity, about the right to claim the power that had been promised and then denied. But even as the heroes fought with desperate courage, the ritual continued. Jos had built redundancies into the magical working, backup systems that could maintain the essential functions even if the primary circle was damaged. The convergence of planar energies was reaching its peak, and the barriers between the material plane and the nine hells were beginning to thin. Above the chamber, visible through a gap in the castle's roof that had been deliberately created for this purpose, The sky began to change. Stars that had shone for millennia flickered and went out, while others blazed with new and unnatural light. The very air began to taste of sulfur and ancient malice as something vast and terrible stirred in the spaces between the worlds. "Too late!" Rezmir gasped, her voice carrying triumph even as Cyanwrath's blade found its mark between her ribs. "The Queen comes, and your victory is meaningless in the face of her power." But her words were cut short as Talis reached the ritual circle and claimed the white dragon mask with hands that shook with anticipation and terror. The moment the artifact touched her skin, power beyond mortal comprehension flowed through her body, transforming her from a skilled warrior into something approaching divinity itself. The mask granted her not just magical abilities, but a direct connection to Tiamat's consciousness, a link that allowed her to understand the true scope of what was about to happen. And what she saw filled her with a horror that transcended any fear she had ever known. The Dragon Queen's return would not simply mean the domination of chromatic dragons over the world. It would mean the fundamental transformation of reality itself, the replacement of a world where diverse life could flourish, with one where only the strong survived and only strength mattered. Every gentle thing, every beautiful thing, every possibility for growth and change and hope would be crushed beneath the weight of draconic tyranny. "No," she whispered. And then louder, "No!" With power granted by the mask itself, Talis turned against the ritual that had been designed to free her goddess. Ice and snow erupted from her position, flash freezing the streams of molten gold and disrupting the magical channels that carried energy to the summoning circle. The cold she commanded was not merely the absence of heat. It was the antithesis of the fiery passion that drove the cult's ambitions. Jos screamed in rage and desperation, pouring his own life force into maintaining the ritual's integrity, but the magical working had been designed for cooperation between all 5 mask bearers, and with one of them actively working against it, the delicate balance of forces began to collapse. The chamber shook as magical energies that should have been flowing in carefully controlled patterns instead erupted in chaotic surges. The accumulated treasure began to melt and flow in directions that had not been calculated, while the ritual circle's patterns warped and twisted under the pressure of forces they had never been designed to contain. And through it all, the sound of something vast and terrible approaching continued to grow. Tiamat was coming, summoned by a ritual that was now collapsing, drawn toward a world that might not survive her arrival in its current state. "The castle!" Blagothkus shouted over the magical chaos. "The ritual tied into the flight systems. If the magical cascade reaches the levitation enchantments..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the chamber understood the implications. Skyreach Castle was held aloft by magic that was now being consumed by the collapsing ritual. When that magic failed, the entire structure would fall from the sky like a stone, taking everyone aboard with it. The battle transformed from one of combat to one of survival, as heroes and villains alike began a desperate race to escape the doomed fortress. The ritual chamber's exits were blocked by rubble and magical fire, while the castle's corridors had become mazes of collapsed walls and twisted metal. But even as they ran, the sound of approaching divinity continued to grow. Whatever happened to the castle, whatever happened to them, Tiamat was coming. The ritual had been damaged but not stopped, and the Dragon Queen's prison was weakening with every passing moment. Through the castle's great windows, they could see the night sky beginning to tear like fabric, revealing glimpses of the 9 hells beyond. Shapes moved in that terrible space. Dragon forms the size of mountains waiting for their queen's command to enter the material world and begin the reshaping of reality. Some of the heroes reached the castle's external platforms in time to see magical escape routes, flying mounts, teleportation circles, emergency levitation spells. Others found themselves trapped as the ancient structure began its final plunge toward the earth below. But in the heart of the collapsing castle, in the ritual chamber where the fate of the world had been decided, Talis stood alone with the white dragon mask still fused to her face. The artifact's power flowed through her, granting her abilities beyond mortal comprehension, but also binding her to the consequences of what she had done. She had stopped the ritual, yes, but she had not stopped it completely. Tiamat would still return, though perhaps not with her full power, perhaps not with perfect control over the magical forces that governed the world. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As Skyreach Castle fell through the night sky like a falling star, its impact creating a crater that would be visible for generations, the heroes who had survived knew that their victory was only the beginning. Somewhere in the spaces between worlds, the Dragon Queen was making her own plans for the future. The Age of Dragons was coming, whether the world was ready or not. But thanks to the courage of unlikely allies and the sacrifice of those who chose redemption over revenge, it would not be the age that Tiamat had planned. There would still be room for hope, still possibilities for different futures, still reasons to fight for the world they all called home. The white dragon mask gleamed in the wreckage of Skyreach Castle, a reminder that power could be turned toward redemption as easily as toward tyranny. And in the growing dawn light, the survivors began to plan for the challenges that lay ahead. And so, this tale draws to a close. Though its echoes may linger in your dreams, the fire burns lower now. But don't despair. I've countless more stories waiting to be shared with you. If this tale stirred something within you, if it reminded you why magic still matters in this mundane world, then please light your own beacon. That glowing thumbs up tells the spirits of story that our fellowship grows stronger. Subscribe to join our circle permanently and ring that notification bell. That way, you'll know the moment I return with new chronicles. The fire burns brightest when more souls gather around it. Wouldn't you agree? Now, if that's the case, share this tale with another weary soul who needs it, reminding them adventure still exists. Tag a friend who would appreciate a good story by the fire. The more who believe, the more real these worlds become. And if you are new to our hearth, explore the playlist chronicles that I've gathered. Tales of heroes and villains, love and loss, magic and mystery, each one carefully chosen for souls like yours. Until the fire calls us together again, may your own adventures be worthy of legend, and may you never lose the wonder that brought you here tonight. Travel or sleep well, brave soul. The long rest awaits your return.